At this time, we'll call to order the regular meeting of Finance Personnel. This is July 9th, 2024. Roll, please.
Alderperson Pere.
Here.
Alderperson Gant.
Here.
Mayor Boyd.
Here.
Alderperson Quigley.
Here.
Alderperson Cutzinger.
Here.
Thank you, Amy. Item 2, approval of the minutes from the June 11th, 2024 regular meeting of the Finance Personnel Committee. I'll move to approve.
Second.
Motion by me, second by Alderperson Pere. Discussion or comments? Seeing there are none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Item 3, public comment upon matters not on the agenda. Comments made during the public comment period shall pertain only to matters under the jurisdiction of the Finance and Personnel Committee. Anyone in person or virtually have any public comments upon matters not on the agenda? If so, just state your name. In person, I'm seeing no one because they're going to speak in just a bit. Anyone virtually have any public comments upon matters not on the agenda? If so, just state your name. For the third and final time, any public comment upon matters not on the agenda? All right, item 4. Consideration and possible action on lease for postage meters at City Hall and the Municipal Service Center. Pam, is this you? Do you want to just briefly describe this?
I'm going to let Carrie take that one.
Carrie, is she up there?
Yeah. Yep.
I'm sorry, Carrie, I apologize. I just looked up there too. Carrie, do you want to describe this one?
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. The city has been on a lease program for both of the postage meters for the past 5 years, and those leases are now expiring. So we're putting this forth to enter into a new lease agreement with basically the same model as what we had before. There is not a lot of options for postage meter vendors and servicing in the Northeast Wisconsin area. So that was the only quote that I was able to get. In your packet, I showed the comparison between the previous lease amount and the proposed new lease amount. So that's what we're recommending going with, because we think from this company, rather than having to go down more towards the Milwaukee area where there would be trip charges involved if we needed to do service calls.
Well, I'm glad they didn't realize they're the only vendor. Questions or comments?
Yeah.
Jeez. Because it seems very reasonable based on the pricing. I would make a motion to approve the lease agreement with Office Enterprises Incorporated.
I'll second.
Motion by me, seconded by Alderperson Gantz. Discussion or comments while we have Carrie here? All right, seeing there are none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Thank you, Carrie.
Thank you very much.
Item 5, consideration and possible action on the purchase of FortiVoice Cloud phone system at a cost of $115,000 with $30,250 to come from Unassigned Reserves. Steve, I see you're there. Steve, do you want to address this one?
Sure. So really, we're at the point where our phone system is at kind of end of life. So in looking at the different phone systems that are available to us, I looked at quite a few different vendors, quite a few different hardware platforms, on-premise hosted, cloud hosted, and the one that I ended up coming up with to be my pick is the FortiVoice Cloud phone system. And really the biggest thing that we would gain by moving to cloud is the redundancy piece, so that if we do have a catastrophe in the DP area that would wipe out a facility, we would still be able to conduct business as long as we're able to establish an internet connection. So I believe that moving to the cloud, now that the prices have come down and it's very comparable versus hosting it on premise. So you're roughly looking at maybe about $1,000 over the course of a year more to be hosted in the cloud, but having that disaster recovery capability. So ultimately, if the worst would happen, we would still be able to conduct email and voice communication with the city pretty much from anywhere in the world. So that's the big benefit of moving to the cloud with voice.
Steve, I think also in your memo, you said something about the prepaid services and kind of the payback over 5 years, because I know we have to take some money from unassigned reserves. Do you want to just describe that?
Yeah. So, yep. So essentially, we would be looking to take roughly 30,000 from unassigned reserves, in the near term, and then over that course of the next 5 years, our costs essentially they would kind of wash each other out after that 5-year term. So essentially, our costs would go down. So we take the 30,000 from unassigned today, and then over the next 5 years, that would be less money that would be coming out. So they kind of wash each other out over that 5-year term.
Very good. Thank you. Questions, comments, or motion? Alderperson Conacher has a question.
What is the contingency should internet service be disrupted?
So the contingency with that is into the 2025 budget cycle. The plan is to essentially get a second internet line into the city so that we would never, there's always a chance, but by having 2 separate carriers provide internet service, we should be very well covered. Today, we currently do not have redundant internet, but that is in the works for the 2025 budget cycle.
And just if internet service is down altogether, is there any landline opportunities still in place at a minimum, like not full service, but any kind of emergency?
So we would be able to, for the main lines, anybody that has a cell phone, we could essentially route calls by loading an app onto any mobile device that has internet on it already. So any of the city-issued phones would be able to install the FortiVoice app, and it would ring at that phone just like if it was at their desk. So that's kind of the short-term stopgap there.
If you guys are comfortable with that sounds
You
great.
seem obviously have some concerns, huh?
I just, maybe it's too many Netflix movies. I don't know.
Oh, watch
Well,
Hulu.
But I think if you think about it,
Steve, go ahead.
another thing to consider is today we don't have that redundancy on the phone system or internet. So we would be in the exact same boat today. So if
That's fair. Okay.
if the phone line carrier goes down, we're down and out, which has happened, a handful of times over the past few years. So I think it's really kind of one of those where there's always going to be those one-offs where you can't plan for it, but by bringing in a redundant internet line next year, we should be very well covered.
Good. Very good questions. Devin, you have no idea what we're talking about, correct?
Yeah, I do.
You do?
I think I know what she's talking about.
All right. Outstanding. Other questions or comments? We'll form one up. You have a question? No. Other questions or comments, or we would take a motion?
I would make a motion to approve the staff recommendation.
Very good. With $30,250 from unassigned reserves, correct?
Yes.
I'll second.
All right. Motion by Alderperson Quigley, second by Alderperson P-Rock. Additional discussion and or comments? And this goes to council, correct? Okay, so it goes to council, and I'm sure we'll have more questions then too, or hopefully it gets answered by then. You can keep answering questions. That said, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Item 6, presentation and approval of the 2023 management letter and financial statements. Pam?
I have a couple of our auditors here. I've got Scott and Elizabeth. I just want to introduce them and let them talk. Do you guys want to sit at the table over there?
All right.
Yep, the big table. It's all yours.
And I did hand out a
Do you need
packet
any-
here with our draft
Thank you.
report.
Oh my God. All right, thank you. Scott, Elizabeth, it's all yours.
All right. Sounds good. Sounds like the mic's working. So I'm Scott Sternhagen with Clifton Larson Allen, and this is Elizabeth McMasters. And we're here to kind of go over the audit. So the audit isn't formally issued yet. Most likely it will be tomorrow. We were hoping to get it done today, but with the 4th and everything else, we couldn't issue it formally today, but it's nothing in here is going to change. And so we just wanted to go over kind of the financial results, everything else. The city did spend over $750,000 of federal awards this year as well, so we had to do a federal single audit. So having to do the normal financial audit plus the federal single audit and being done with it at this time frame is great. We haven't been able to get it done this early anyway, and then plus with the federal single audit. So even like last year, I think we had the audit somewhat done, but we didn't have the federal single audit until September. So from that standpoint, it's good to have everything wrapped up. But yeah, like I said, we'll issue formally probably tomorrow or the next day, but we don't, everything's pretty much through tech review, and it's just the last couple sign-offs here. So kind of go over the executive summary. Pam passed that out. And obviously it's in a draft format because it's not formally issued, but page 1, it just goes over the audit opinion. It's a clean audit report. Same thing with a single audit report as well. Internal controls, we did have 2 findings. It's finding 1 is we prep the annual financial report. If you have that report, that's what is it up to about 120 pages now. So we prepare that. So we have to disclose that. And finding number 2, it was regarding your federal single audit suspension and debarment. Just some stuff that wasn't done through the single audit process through was it ARPA? ARPA, the ARPA funds. Nothing to be really concerned about. Obviously we talked to Pam about that, but again, nothing really to be concerned with it. I think that's, from my memory, we didn't have a preparatory or a journal entry finding this year, and that's the first time in many years, let's just call it that, that we did not have that finding. And so like I said, the audit from our standpoint went really well. We were able to kind of work through the TIF stuff as well and clean those up and make the transfers back and forth to the debt service fund to make sure those are all trued up now. And from our standpoint, the audit went really well. There were no other compliance findings that we had to report. And that's kind of just a brief summary of kind of our standpoint. Pam did a really good job, especially being really her first. Was it your first full year? Were you? Okay.
Wow. April of last year.
Yeah. Yeah. So Pam did a really good job as her first full year. So we're very, very happy with that, and it's good for the city. So, page 2, formal required communications, and again, this is required communications, so I'm not really going to go over this because that's when it gets really boring, and we're boring enough. Page 3, kind of what I already said. We didn't have any difficulties in dealing with management. We did not have any uncorrected misstatements. We did have some small journal entries, but nothing large, and those were corrected. We went over those multiple times with you. No disagreements with management, so on and so forth. So page 4 talks just, again, nothing that we didn't talk about already. Page 5, again, more required communication. Page 6 talks about internal control communications. This is where we had the 2 findings. This is another required page in here with the federal single audit. So I already talked about it, but I'm not going to go over any of that right now. And then page 9 is the financial information. So I went over, obviously, those first couple pages fairly quick. Is there any questions on anything I went over before we dive into the financial information? I know you guys haven't had time to look at this, and So.
Any questions at first blush? Larry, anything that you have?
No, but are you going to be at the council meeting then next Tuesday as well for this?
She will be.
Okay.
All right.
Oh,
You
have a meeting?
I'm at
Okay.
a meeting.
Well,
What time is it at?
7:30.
7:30.
It just would be good for somebody to be here because they haven't had a chance to really look at the documents beforehand.
Yeah.
And so that
Where am
if
I?
they have questions.
Let me look at my
I'll
schedule.
have to look at my calendar. My other meeting might be at 6, and I'm pretty sure it's going to be remote, so I might be able to.
Okay.
Okay.
She lives in the
And
city of
remote
De Pere.
correct?
Yeah.
I live in a different state.
Okay. Yep.
One that's 2 miles away, or no?
And remote is fine as well too,
Yeah.
so keep that in mind.
Okay.
So, all right. So we'll figure out.
Alderperson Quigley, one second.
So you mentioned a couple of times the deficiency. Can you just give me a little context for the first one, preparation of the annual financial? Was it a step that was missed or something that was just not?
No, the city relies on their auditors to prepare the report and all the required disclosures.
Yep.
I would say 95% of municipalities should have that in, is because otherwise the city would have to do it all themselves. Now, could Pam do it? Maybe, probably, but does she have 3 weeks to do it?
No.
Yeah. So we do. I mean, I do 50 alone. I don't know how many Elizabeth does. So it's just, and then we have all of our people to do it. So it's just, we're doing it out of convenience, but we have to disclose that we prepare it.
Okay.
So that is nothing to be worried about by any means.
So it's listed as a deficiency, but it sounds like it's the default setting for a lot of institutions, and just you need to declare that it's
Correct.
It's what's going on. Got it.
I think I have 1 or 2 clients that don't have that finding in.
Okay.
That's it.
Thank you.
We also would get that in the city of Green Bay. 'Cause
Right.
We also had our auditors do
It'd be
that.
nice if they dropped the word significant.
Well, it could be material.
Anything
That's
but
the
significant.
second finding, but yeah.
Got it.
Okay. Okay.
Thanks.
Anything else?
Anybody else while we move on here?
Okay. All right. So yeah, page 9, financial information. So this lists out all your governmental funds. This is not your utilities, but this lists out all your governmental funds. And I'll kind of go through a little bit of it, and we have more on your general fund and your TIF funds on the next page, so I don't want to go too into depth, but I just kind of want to touch base on this. So you can see your general fund with a comparison to the previous year. Total general fund balance at the end of the year, $11,839,000, which is up $1.1 million roughly from the previous year, so your fund balance did increase by $1.1 million. The largest portion of that is your unassigned, as you guys just talked about taking some money from, unassigned for the phone system. You can see that is roughly $8.2 million.
Did 15. Oof.
And that went up $679,000 during the year. You have other segments of that fund balance. You have other funds that are in deficits, and the general fund is covering that. So that's why that's non-spendable, because another fund already spent that money, and the general fund kind of advanced it to them. That's about $2 million. And then you have $1.1 million set aside in your non-lapsing or your committed funds, money that you've already earmarked for specific projects. So I'll touch base a little bit more on the general fund on the next page. But just a brief summary of that, that's the breakdown of all the different segments of your general fund. You can see debt service had a fund balance of $2.2 million, and Pam and I worked even just yesterday on cleaning up and closing out TID 6 and all the other TIDs. In the past, the TID, kind of advanced money to all these TIDs to make the debt service payments, and Pam said, let's clean that up in 2023, and let's get that to get the TIF's fund balances to really what they truly should be based upon the debt payments. And we did that, and really on the debt service fund, it kind of didn't really have much of an impact on, because the TIFs kind of washed each other out. But $2.2 million set aside for debt service. Your special revenue funds follow that. You can see the following special revenue funds fairly consistent to the previous year. That has about $3.9 million in all the special revenue funds. And then you can see your capital projects fund. You can see your TIDs. TID 6 is now closed out. We did the calculation on closing out that TID, and then the other taxing jurisdictions will be getting a portion of that excess fund balance, or the excess unreimbursed cost. And then you can see your capital equipment had $2.6 million. I know Pam, you spent a lot of time on that in 2023, kind of going back in the previous years. Same thing with your public improvements, which is in a deficit of $2.1 million. And I talked about that advance from the general fund. It's really advancing the capital improvements fund, their deficit. And you can see just the other smaller deficits, or the other funds that have deficits. The pool capital projects, which we knew that was going to happen. That's been going down every year. And then just the following TIDs there. TID 7, fairly big deficit of $3.6 million there. But, that will happen with your TIDs, especially 16 and 17. They just started. You startup costs and getting that increment in. So that's normal for 16 and 17, as those are fairly new TIDs. And then those other TIDs are just obviously waiting for some development. And I know I'm sure you guys are
That's good.
talking on that. So those are your governmental funds. I'll flip to the next page.
Really quick before you go, because
Yeah.
I know we have unassigned reserves here.
Yep.
Does it show we're well above 35%?
That's the next page.
Oh, is that next?
Yep.
I apologize.
Yeah.
I was,
No.
I was just looking at the stuff there. Go
Yep.
ahead.
Yep. Yeah. So if you flip to the next page, you can see your general fund. As I mentioned, it increased. 1.1 million. 25% of your budgeted expenses would be about 5.5. So yes, you are well over your 25%. 35% of your general fund budgeted expenditures would be about 7.7. So you're above that, but you're not. You're 8.1. So you're right there, right? So
Okay.
so you're in where your fund balance should be, and by your policy, and even above it, but not way above it to say what are we doing here. So
time to buy a new phone system. That's expensive.
yes, yeah.
And some.
Yeah, but you're in a good financial spot because as
on board.
expenses increase, then your fund balance has to increase as well. But no, like I said, you can see the city is managing their general fund balance very well based upon their policies, and you're above it, but you're not, like I said, you're not like, wow, what are they doing with all that money?
So I have a question.
Sure. All the
So
person.
because it is on the upper of that and even over, do we reallocate that into the budget if it exceeds the 35% threshold?
That's the $100 question, Larry.
Typically, what we do or have done in the past is, as part of the mayor's executive budget, we would be recommending using excess in the unassigned reserves to purchase capital or one-time projects that otherwise we would be using tax money for.
Yep.
But nothing that would create a hole in the budget. And again, nothing that's unusual that we're not planning to do. So it's not like frivolous money, that type of thing.
Right.
So that's what we use it for. And we'd be proposing to bring it down to 35% in the same way for
Yeah.
2025.
Okay.
Yeah, and then you can do that through the budget, or in this case, as I mentioned, your one of your capital projects funds has a deficit, so maybe you transfer money for projects there, and that would be more of a question for you, or thought for you is you could transfer any excess to fund that deficit in your capital projects fund, that funds you already spent. So options, which is
Options.
good.
Options are good. Good to have
Yep.
options.
Yep. So that's kind of where your general fund's at. So as I mentioned, we believe the city's in good financial shape, managing their general fund balance appropriately through their budget process, and kind of going from there. The next couple blurbs is on your tax incremental districts, and this is just a lot more for informational purposes. You can see TID 6. I did keep that on there because it was terminated, but it was then the financial things, it was closed. But there's some payments that left are to be made to the other taxing jurisdictions. And then we have to have a final audit for TID 6 as well. So I wanted to keep that on there just to say, you have some final stuff to do in 24 to close it for 23. Otherwise, TID 7 through really TID 17 is on pages 10 and 11, for your reference. It says what the fund balance is, what the unreimbursed costs are, and what the outstanding debt related to each TID is too. All right, page 12 is the self-insurance fund, and this is just page 12 and 13 actually. Normally on one page, but this is just more for informational. Dental self-insurance kind of runs pretty steady, so nothing to be alarmed of there. Like I said, that runs normally fairly steady. Health insurance, you brought in revenues of 2.4 million, expenses of 2.8, bringing in an operating loss of 325. The net position is still in a good spot. I think that the city has, the last 2 years, you can see that you've had a healthy reserve, and the plan was, hey, let's not increase premiums even though expenses are going up, and use that reserve. You are at 1.4 million, and that's about 68% of your claims. So still in a good financial spot. I don't know if you guys have looked in 24 or you're talking about it.
We've looked at next year at an increase and using some of that fund balance
For 25?
for 25.
Yeah. So again, options and flexibility, which is good. You're not in the spot like we need to increase premiums now. You have some time to. Eventually, you're going to have to. But with a $1.4 million net position, that you have some flexibility there. And then page 13 is just a graph showing the gradual decline of that net position that in a way is kind of planned. It grew and saying, well, we have this big dollar amount. Let's, instead of increasing premiums, let's just draw that down. So it's a good thing. That's your self-insurance fund. The next couple pages are going to be on your utilities. Before I jump into that, anything on the stuff that we already went over? Information we already went over?
Larry, go ahead.
Just to clarify, for the insurance, the health insurance, it's actually tracking right as we were proposing it to and as you adopted it. So we're pretty much right on schedule, and we're proposing right now a 10% increase in the premiums for 2025. So we're doing well.
Good. Thank you.
And you probably, I don't know when was the last time you even raised premiums. Probably not for a little bit.
A few years.
Well, 3.
24 we increased.
Well, we did, but before that we actually
Before that,
rebates.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. All right, your water utility. Now this is kind of the operating results really don't show the cash side of things, but we want to show your operating and then kind of where the cash goes for the water utility. So the water utility reported an increase in net position of 1.7 million. Actually, probably should be 1.8. We'll clean that up before we issue. Operating gain of 870,000 because we had that small transfer from the TID that we did yesterday, 42,000 when we cleaned that out. So from an operation standpoint, the water utility is doing good. You can see your operating revenues is about 7.3 million and your operating expenses is about 6.4 million. Then you have some large capital contributions, which is a lot of times your TID or other capital funds providing infrastructure for the TID. So it's not cash, or for the water utility, sorry. It's not cash, it's infrastructure that's going in the ground, but the TIDs are paying for it. That's normally that big capital contribution of 1.3 million. And you can see from a cash flow, so I like to say, okay, from an operating standpoint, you look great. And if you look below, we looked at the cash flow, you generated $1.7 million from operations of cash. Once you got your money in from your customers, paid new water, paid all your employees, everything after that, you had $1.7 million left. You are required to transfer out for a payment in lieu of tax, and that's $427,000 to the general fund. So after that, $1.3 million. Your debt payments are fairly small for a water utility your size, about $110,000. So you had amounts available to fund capital assets of about $1.2 million, and then you spent $1.7 on capital. So all the cash you're generating is going back into the utility, which is good, right? You're putting it back into the infrastructure. Just in 2023, you put more into the infrastructure than you generated, and that's where from a net change in cash was still the amount due to the other funds was still a $535,000 deficit, and that's why your water utility doesn't have cash and they're borrowing. If you look at on the balance sheet, they don't have any cash. They're borrowing it from the wastewater utility and the stormwater utility at the end of the year. So as a city that's over 125 years old or more than that, you're going to have that. You have a larger city. You have to reinvest in your infrastructure, but you don't have a lot of debt. So you're not making a lot of debt payments on that. And I don't know if the debt guy is here after us, so I don't know if you're borrowing for the water utility or the utilities or not.
Not this year,
Yeah.
but we will be looking at doing it going forward because that's something we discussed during the rate case. The PSC doesn't take into account that the general fund is backing all this. We actually have to take out debt for it to be included in our rate case to be able to raise our rates to cover that.
Yep.
So
Yep, that's the PSC for you.
Yeah, that's
So
just crazy.
I'm not even going to try to explain to you. But like I said, from an operational standpoint, you're doing well. It's just the capital that how are you funding capital? That would be my biggest question. So moving forward. That's the water utility. Page 15 is your wastewater utility. Kind of same thing. I showed operations, and then from a cash flow standpoint, you can see very consistent on our operating revenues. I mean, $8,000 difference from the previous year on $10.4 million. Operating expenses did decrease a little bit, so about $7.8 million. Bringing your operating income to a positive $2.6 million. You had some capital contributions, as I talked about. Same thing, probably your TID, generating some or doing some sewer improvements. Transfer out, same thing. They transfer out some money there for $255, bringing your change in net position to a positive $4.1 million. From a cash standpoint, generated $2.8 million of cash from operations. Transfer out $255. They acquired about $1.5 million of capital, and their debt is fairly similar. I think it's the same exact payment as the water utility, about $110,000. So they generated a positive $927,000 even with funding the capital. And again, that's kind of helping the water utility. If you look at what the water utility, they lost $535. Well, the sewer gained $927. So the sewer is generating enough revenue to fund it's $1.5 million of capital a year. So again, your sewer operations, your rate structure there, everything looks like it's in a good spot. So thought I was done. One more, stormwater. That one's so much easier. Revenues of $2.5 million, expenses of $2 million. You had some grants there, non-operating grants. So that brings your, change in net position before capital contributions to about, $650,000. And normally with your sewer operations, you'll do some large capital improvements. And when those come, those are larger. But normally those aren't as frequent as your water and sewer. So your stormwater is in a good spot too. So really, your general fund's in great shape. You have a couple TIDs that are lacking, really mainly TID 7. I'll just summarize. Your capital improvements fund is in a deficit. Capital equipment fund's in a good spot. Sewer utility, stormwater, both doing good. Water utility, you just went through a rate case, so you're on top of it. Just what the PSC allows you to do there and how you're going to fund future capital. So that's kind of, and everything from an audit standpoint went pretty good, really good.
Very good. Questions, comments? Need a motion on this at all, or motion to accept the audit?
It's not really finalized,
So just
Move it to
information only right now?
Yeah, just it'll be forwarded to council and then council acts on it.
And it will be finalized at that time, or
it better be.
The next version we get will be, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I assume some of the other council members might have some questions at council on Tuesday, so, and
Yeah.
You as well.
Mhm.
So, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Appreciate it.
Elizabeth. Thanks, Scott.
Yep.
Anything else on this one? Pam, I can go to the next item. Item 7, approval of the parameter resolution for 2024 borrowing. Pam?
I have Justin from Baird here to review it. In short, though, we've included a list of the projects that we had presented to finance last month. There were a couple small changes that I noted on that, mostly decreases. Dan and I had gone through all the TID ones and kind of eliminated borrowing on some of them because we're going to use fund balance on TID 12, for instance. A fund that's TID that's doing well doesn't need to borrow, right? We can just use that fund balance. But I'll let Justin take over.
Yeah.
All right.
Thanks, Pam. It's great to see everyone. Thanks for having me here. So I'm going to go through a quick market update, go through the financing structure and timeline, detailed financing illustration, and then finish off with the borrowing capacity for the city after this is going to be completed. So if we go to page 2 of that little packet, this is an interest rate graph. I've shown you this in the past. Really what it's showing you on the top right is the past year and kind of what's happened in interest rates. It's been a very volatile year. You've been hearing it in the news all the time. Every time the Fed speaks, the market moves one way or another. And so it's been a very interesting time. But when you look at this top right kind of graph, starting in October of last year through November, we kind of peaked. And that was where, inflation was being very sticky, and we weren't seeing any signs of it coming down. And then some, economic news came out, and it started to show that maybe the Fed's going to actually do something. And they started to signal that there may be 5 rate cuts in 2024. That shot interest rates down pretty dramatically, pretty quick. Well, then, as new economic news continued to kind of go throughout 2024, instead of 5, then it went to 4, then it went to 3, and then it went to possibly none. Well, most recently, we started to see some news come out in the marketplace where, unemployment's coming up a little bit higher, inflation continues to kind of come down, and the Fed has signaled, okay, well, maybe we will have 1 to 2 cuts this year. And so, again, you see a nice little drop in interest rates over the last really several weeks. That's when it's happened. So, it's been a volatile marketplace. It's going to continue to be volatile probably for the next year at least, as economic news continues to come out. But this is really kind of give you a visual that, kind of November was the height, and we've come down pretty dramatically since that point. Now, if we go to page 3 here, the estimated size for this borrowing would be $7,840,000. It's going to be general obligation promissory notes and fund the 2024 CIP projects that Pam was just talking about. There's going to be some capitalized interest through 2026 on the TID number 18. So as Scott was kind of just saying, that newer TID district doesn't have really the revenues to be able to support itself. So giving it some time over the next couple of years before those revenues are starting to be generated and then can pay the debt service. So that's the strategy there. And that's where, I'm working with Pam and Dan, kind of looking at those different analyses to determine that. And for the structure, maturing September 1, 2025 to 2039. First interest payment, March 1 of 2025. Callable September 1, 2032, or any date thereafter. So again, that's when we can potentially refinance or prepay it. And then the estimated interest rate is a 4.25% with a not to exceed parameter of 4.75%. So between now and when we potentially go out to the marketplace and lock in the interest rate, if all of a sudden interest rates start shooting up for whatever reason, some economic news comes out, say CPI comes out and it's, way higher than what everyone's expecting, and interest rates start shooting up. Well, that's where I probably want to get back in front of you and say, hey, right now may not be the best time to jump into the market. Maybe we wait till things cool down. So that's the reason for the parameters resolution, is to give flexibility of when we jump into the market versus a set date in August or so forth. So that's the reason for the parameters. Now, the Finance Committee and personnel would consider the plan of finance and parameters resolution tonight. Preparations for the official statement and the Moody's rating are taking place. So working with Pam and her team, getting that compiled right now. We have the rating scheduled for the next couple of weeks, where myself, Larry, Pam, Dan, Shannon may all participate on that, where we answer a bunch of questions from Moody's about the financials, the audit that's going to be coming out, what developments happening in the city, how's the fund balance, etc. looking, and then ultimately they go back and go to their committee, make a recommendation, and then let us know what that rating is. The city has a current AA2 bond credit rating, which is extremely strong, one of the best bond credit ratings, and I think the goal is to continue to try to maintain that. And I hearing the audit and so forth and looking at everything, I don't see any concerns with that. So council would consider the Finance Personnel Committee recommendation, adopt their parameters resolution next week, July 16th. Again, the parameters resolution defines a narrow set of parameters, ultimately giving you flexibility to lock in the long-term interest rates between council meetings and when timing is optimal. So we're going to be targeting kind of that week of August 26th, but if all of a sudden some economic news comes out that particular time where it's not very favorable and interest rates are shooting up and they're, buyers are shying away from potentially bidding on your debt, well, then that's when we talk to Pam and say, hey, maybe we wait a week, let things cool down, because usually right now in the marketplace, it's very reactionary. And sometimes it just takes a couple days for things to cool down, and then we see things come down pretty quick right after that. But it's very reactionary right now. And then the closing potentially September 18th of 2024. So going to page 4, this is the detailed financing illustration. So you've seen this kind of a picture in the past, but the left side of the page, that's your existing debt service payments from the city portion of the debt. Then we're going to be potentially doing the TID number 17 financing. So we layered in that existing debt service. And then in the middle of the page, that's kind of the breakdown of the $7,840,000. So city portion, TID 17, TID number 18. When you look to the right side of the page, that takes everything into account and kind of factors in what things may look like after the financing takes place. So you can see what the combined debt service for the city may look like, and then the combined debt service for 17 and number 18. So again, the city portion, what's nice about that is you can see declining debt service year over year to account for future capital projects, because that's something that Pam, myself, Dan, we're all kind of evaluating year over year to make sure that you don't see any drops and spikes in your debt service, et cetera, and we're planning for that future. So going to the last page here, page 5, this is your general obligation borrowing capacity. Again, municipalities in Wisconsin are allowed to borrow up to 5% of your equalized valuation through general obligation debt. So the city's valuation right now, TID-in, is over $3.3 billion. You've seen pretty significant growth over the last 5 years. I mean, when I think about 2019, you were at 2.2 billion. Now you're at 3.3 billion. So pretty significant growth that the city has seen, which is great. Because when you look at this picture, the black bars, that's your outstanding general obligation debt. And you can see how it's decreasing year over year because, again, you're very prudent in how you go about borrowing and paying down your debt at a quick pace. So that's dropping down at a pretty good rate. That allows you to be able to do these projects, get things done in your community, and not have any significant increases, to this chart and so forth. So the blue bars, that's what we're talking about tonight. That's the 7.8 being layered in, and again being paid off over time. The gray is your remaining borrowing capacity that you have available to you. So pretty significant borrowing authority still available. At the end of 2024, after this borrowing takes place, you potentially are going to still have over 64% or $108 million in available borrowing capacity. Now, there's no plans to ever get close to that. There hasn't been. But that just gives everyone comfort that you're doing very good. I mean, you're getting things done and you're paying down your debt, and you still got a ton of capacity to be able to get future things done at the same time. So kudos to everyone for that.
Does the borrowing capacity help our Moody rating, or is that not even factored in?
It absolutely is one of the factors.
That helps, huh?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, does it play in a strong portion of it? No, but that's a factor. Absolutely. I mean, if we had used say 80%
right.
of your capacity, they will start raising
They'll start to
eyebrows.
Wonder. Okay. All right. So it has to be something. The other question, we've not done parameter resolutions before, correct? This is kind of
Correct.
a new, this tool's been there, obviously.
It's been there, and as things continue to be very volatile, and we're in a marketplace where interest rates are jumping up 25 basis points, down 25 basis points pretty rapidly, I think that's where it made sense to say, instead of targeting a specific day and being locked into that day that we have to go out to the marketplace, let's potentially be flexible and target a certain week and then start monitoring what's going on in the marketplace, what's the supply in the marketplace, et cetera, what's happening.
I like that. Chairman Powell spoke today and just, move things up and down just based on one sentence. It doesn't take much, does it?
It doesn't take much right now.
Man. Questions or comments? Were you done? I apologize, Justin.
I'm done. Yep, okay.
You are now, all right.
Seemed like there was a pause there. I waited.
Yeah.
I waited a good.
Yeah.
It was at least 3 seconds. What? Did you notice that too? Yeah. Questions or comments? I would make a motion to approve. We need this correct. The parameters resolution to go to the Common Council on July 16th for final approval.
Second.
Motion by me, seconded by Alderperson Conacher. Any additional discussion and/or comments? it is good that we're in good financial shape. So thank you. Thank you for that, both of you, all of you, Larry as well. That said, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Justin.
Yep.
Thought you this was gonna be a fast meeting. That's what you had said when we walked in. Well, this will be a fast meeting. That's what you said. Huh. Odd. Item 8, consideration and possible action on the City of De Pere investment and cash detail for May of 2024. See you, Justin. Any questions or comments on cash detail? I'd make a motion to place it on file.
Second.
Motion by me, second by Alderperson P-Rock. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Item 9, future agenda items. Does anyone have future agenda items? All right. Item 10, I will make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion by me, seconded by Alderperson Cuniger. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. We're officially adjourned.